The entry of American B-2s into Iran during the early stages of Operation Epic Fury was a turning point that nearly brought about the downfall of the regime that was in power in Iran. In a single instant, bunkers, bases, and missile launch sites were destroyed. Now, the United States of America has taken things a step further. Iran has just been hit by yet another even more huge B-2 strike, which has resulted in the United States' stealth bomber destroying some of the most important objectives that Iran had left to lose. Iran was not prepared for the level of destruction that has befallen the country, and there is more to come. Following the initial attack that the United States B-2 Spirit stealth bombers carried out on Iran, they have continued their operations by flying flights even further into the country. During these missions, they have destroyed dozens of ballistic missile facilities that Iran has constructed underground and in its mountains. These locations are being bombarded with penetrator bombs weighing 2,000 pounds each, which are demolishing any protection they may have had and opening the door for subsequent attacks that would damage Iran's ability to fire ballistic missiles. Iran is losing its ability to fight back against the United States as a result of this. The country's planned saturation approach, which we will get into later in the video, has been shattered even before it began, and it is all thanks to the B-2s and their targeting of what have become known as Iran's missile cities. We will be discussing this strategy in further detail later on in the video. These cities are extraordinarily large, and they serve as the focal point of Iran's overall strategy. El País published a report on them on March 2nd, stating that Iran possesses a massive ballistic missile stockpile of 3,000 weapons as of 2022. This information was extremely devastating, despite the fact that there are still uncertainties over the accuracy of the missiles. It is essential for the United States to remove these ballistic missiles from the equation in order to achieve its strategy in Iran. It is necessary for the United States to strike the missile cities in order to accomplish this. Iranian cities are huge networks that are buried deep underground, sometimes reaching depths of up to 500 meters or more than 1,640 feet. These cities are where Iran stores its ballistic missiles and the launchers that it needs in order to fire them at its adversaries. As a result of the United States Operation Epic Fury, Iran has already demonstrated that these missile cities are effective by launching attacks against their own military installations located around the Middle East. The scale of those strikes, on the other hand, has significantly slowed down as a result of the United States and its B-2 bombers taking the method of destroying the holes built into the missile towns. These openings allow Iran to quickly wheel out launchers' fire and then hide. Iran's reliance on that technique is not yielding the desired results. As you will discover in the following section, the United States and Israel are able to react to each launch in a matter of minutes. However, what the United States possesses with the missile cities is a combination of Iran's most significant danger, and as it turns out, one of the country's most severe vulnerabilities. In light of this, the Wall Street Journal reports that the United States is launching a wave of heavy bombing on these concealed missile cities, which is basically engulfing the missiles and launchers that are contained within them, rendering them virtually worthless. According to the publication, Iran has attempted to make up for this prior to the beginning of the strike by distributing some of its launchers and missiles around the area. However, this defeats the purpose of the missile cities in the first place. It is interesting to note that the same could be stated of the B-2s that are destroying these cities with their bombing mission. By carrying out its most recent wave of strikes, the United States is rendering the missile cities irrelevant. As a consequence of the most recent B-2 flights carried out by the United States, Iran's whole strategy has been rendered ineffective before it has even had the opportunity to get off the ground. This is straight-up B-2, air power supremacy, long-range operations, stealth penetration, and precision strikes that have already trimmed Iran's missile barrages by almost 90%, according to Max Afterburner, who describes it in his coverage of the latest B-2 strikes. It's not like the number just sprang out of thin air. Admiral Brad Cooper, who is in charge of the United States Central Command, stated this on March 6th when he announced that Iran's ballistic missile launches have decreased by 90% compared to the first day of the war. The reason for this is because Iran's B-2 bombers, which carry bombs weighing 2,000 pounds, are the reason for this decrease. It is the annihilation of Iran's missile saturation plan, which is at the core of the country's entire military doctrine that these bombers have been successful in accomplishing. A stockpile of approximately 3,000 ballistic missiles was constructed by Iran for a specific cause. Their strategy consisted of releasing wave after wave of these missiles in conjunction with drones in order to annihilate their adversary, regardless of the kind of the adversary they were facing. What is actually taking place is that the overwhelming force of this kind of missile and bomb campaign has been turned against Iran, and the B-2S that the United States of America has deployed are at the center of everything because they have prevented Iran from being able to strike back. Following Berner's explanation, Iran employs a strategy known as saturation tactics, which means that they would like to overwhelm those interceptor missiles to the greatest extent possible. In order to prevent Iran's missiles from landing down and inflicting damage, these interceptors are being blasted out by U.S. warships and bases located throughout the Middle East. In spite of the fact that they are valuable regardless of how you look at it, the United States' utilization of its B-2 bombers has resulted in Iran being unable to saturate as it had hoped. This means that Iran has been forced to change to a more limited approach, which we will get into further if you continue to be with us. This means that there are less expensive interceptors being employed. According to the Alma Research and Education Center, Iran's strategic objective prior to the involvement of the United States was to construct an arsenal consisting of 8,000 ballistic missiles. According to the publication, this would result in the generation of a target saturation capacity that would be capable of overwhelming Israeli defense systems. Furthermore, this capability would be utilized against any other adversary who would dare to cross Iran's path. Under the command of its B-2 bombers, the United States has launched a hailstorm of penetrator bombs which have completely eliminated the doctrine, and this is the method that the bombers use to accomplish their goal. In the 72 hours preceding up to March 6th, the bomber force of the United States carried out attacks on 200 targets deep into Iran, including numerous sites located in close proximity to Tehran, the capital city. In addition to the B-2s, this force consisted of a combination of other bombers. In spite of this, it was the B-2s that were responsible for releasing their penetrator bombs weighing 2,000 pounds against some of Iran's ballistic missile launchers that were placed deep underground and were guarded very carefully. To put it another way, the United States has been doing a great deal more than only the use of standoff weapons to launch strikes at a distance. The stealth capabilities of the B-2S have enabled it to get up close and personal with the targets that the United States needed to hit. This has been a significant factor in the tremendous degradation of Iran's missile capabilities that we are currently witnessing. This degradation is a result of the BLU-109, which has made it conceivable. During this second series of strikes, the B-2 bombers mostly utilized the 2,000-pound penetrator, which we have already mentioned on multiple occasions. This was considered to be the most effective weapon. And there is a good reason for that, as the BLU-109 provides the United States with exactly enough of what it required to accomplish its objectives in Iran, while also enabling the United States to retain an even more powerful threat in reserve, which it can rely upon when the time is right. A high-explosive blast fragmentation warhead with a steel alloy case that is built expressly to punch through fortified targets, such as the bunkers that Iran uses to shield its missile launchers, is described by Deagle. He also mentions that the bomb is manufactured by Lockheed Martin and that it is a high-explosive blast fragmentation warhead. Despite the fact that Deagle claims that 600 of these bombs have been sold to the United Arab Emirates, we do not know how many of these bombs the United States of America has in its inventory. If this is the case, then we have no choice but to conclude that the United States has amassed a significant number of additional bombs for its own use, which would enable its B-2S to launch dozens of bombs at a target during a single hit. To be more specific, the B-2S would have most likely utilized the BLU-109B form of the bomb, which is effectively a slimline Mark 84 with penetrative capabilities. The warhead has been utilized in the past with a variety of guided bombs, including GBU-31 guided bombs, as well as laser-guided bombs, including GBU-24 and GBU-27, amongst others. it is possible that the B-2s of the United States possess the capability of deploying these powerful bombs from a distance. For this most recent wave of strikes, the United States of America equipped its B-2s with one of the most adaptable weapons it possesses in terms of its ability to target specific targets. As Max Afterburner describes further, it is stated that BLU-109s carried into GBU-31s had the ability to punch through earth rock and reinforced concrete. This is normally between 4 and 6 feet of concrete, but it might be much deeper if it was only soil before the delayed fuse is set off. Following the activation of that delayed fuse, around 500 pounds of explosive detonation will tear through whatever target the B-2s of the United States of America strike, resulting in a huge shockwave that will flatten everything in its sphere of influence. Complete tunnels are destroyed, underground bunkers vanish without a trace, and the missiles and launchers that the United States of America want to remove from the game are taken with them off the battlefield. On the other hand, you might be thinking, but wait a second. You informed us before that some of Iran's missile cities can be located literally hundreds of feet underground. In order to prevent Iran from using these cities, what would a bomb that only just barely penetrates a fraction of that amount of space accomplish? Simply put, that is an excellent question, and we will provide an answer to it in a moment. Before we get any further into that topic, however you are currently watching the military show, it is the ideal time to click the button to subscribe if you have not done so already, since this will ensure that you do not miss any videos. Therefore, the success of the BLU-109 is dependent on two different factors: how the bombs are used, as well as the exact targets that the B-2s of the United States of America struck with them. On the front of targets, the United States is not aiming for its bomb to penetrate so deeply underground that it may destroy a city that is comprised of missiles. The entrances and exits of these underground cities, which are essentially vast networks of underground tunnels, are of more significance than anything else. When a missile is launched from thousands of feet underground, it is impossible to do so. It is necessary to bring the launcher out into the open, even if this means constructing a door into a mountain in order to deliver its payload. In this manner, the United States of America has been utilizing its B-2 bombers. It is not the missile cities themselves that are being destroyed. Rather, it is the entrances and exits to the missile cities. And as each of these holes is closed, Iran's missile forces are left with fewer options, and their launch strategy is a plan that brings with it a great deal of risk. This is because each launch indicates the existence of yet another opening that the United States can attack. We will provide Afterburner with an explanation on the follow-ups. According to him, however, if you drop 100 guns on a certain location, you will be able to employ those BLU-109s to penetrate quite deeply and satisfy even the most difficult targets. That the United States B-2s are able to travel even further is the result of this. According to the United States Air Force, a B-2 is capable of carrying a payload of 40,000 pounds. From the perspective of the BLU-109, this equates to 20 bombs, all of which are capable of being dropped on a single target, possibly over the course of multiple runs. It is possible for the United States to hit buried targets that it would not be able to hit with a single bomb if it were to use a single bomb. Each batch builds upon the previous one, digging deeper than the one before it. Furthermore, this is not even taking into account the additional bombs that American aircraft are capable of dropping onto a target once their penetrators have completed their mission. A hole is created by the B-2s. Subsequent bombers have the ability to complete the destruction of everything in that hole. In all honesty, Iran ought to be pleased with the fact that the United States and its B-2s are only dropping BLU-109s at the moment, due to the fact that the United States possesses bunker busters that are significantly more potent. The situation could become much more dire. Massive Ordnance Penetrator is the name of one of those bunker bombs, and it says everything we need to know about it. This bunker buster, which is also referred to as the MOP, is 15 times larger than the BLU-109, and it has the capability of being loaded into the B-2. According to the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the MOP is capable of penetrating depths of up to 200 feet, and once it reaches its target, it detonates a warhead weighing 5,000 pounds. This means that it possesses 10 times the amount of firepower that the BLU-109 does. Additionally, similar to the BLU-109, it is possible to drop numerous MOPs on a single target in order to achieve deeper penetration rates. As a result of the United States' deployment of these heavy bombs against Iran's nuclear facilities throughout the summer of 2025, Afterburner notes that Iran is already quite familiar with these bombs. The United States of America is currently using its B-2S to send out a kind of warning shot, which may seem as absurd as it may sound. It should be noted that these are warning shots that are tearing through Iran's missile strategy. Nevertheless, the United States is capable of striking far more forcefully, and it possesses the MOP trump card at its disposal. Allow us to proceed. We have discussed the actions that the B-2S took during their most recent round of strikes, yet we have only scratched the surface of what they have accomplished. By deploying stealthy aircraft such as the B-2 or the F-35, the United States has altered the battlefield in preparation for what it intends to accomplish in the future. This is something that happens every time a stealthy aircraft is deployed. To put it another way, the United States employs stealth bombers, such as the B-2, to get in regardless of the state of the air defense system and destroy targets that other bombers and fighters might not be able to hit. Iran's military capabilities are diminished as a result of each of these strikes, which enables non-stealth airframes to move further into Iran in order to carry out subsequent attacks. This is a multi-pronged strategy for achieving air superiority, which offers the United States the ability to dictate how Iran conducts its operations and what it can do to protect itself against them. It is not possible to observe this more clearly than in the current situation that Iran is experiencing on the missile front. If one were to assert that Iran's missiles have been entirely shut down, they would be making a fabrication. Afterburner makes the observation that Iran is now increasing the number of strategic hits they are launching, which allows them to fire a lot less, but they are being more strategic. This strategy was brought to light on March 8th, when the Times of India claimed that Iran had carried out a missile strike against a naval base in Bahrain that was operated by the United States. According to Afterburner, Iran has also widened its target scope to encompass oil refineries and other targets of a similar nature. The Wall Street Journal also reports that Iran has been attempting to hit the radars that support the missile defenses of the United States during the past several days. Iran continues to pose a concern. However, because of the B-2s, it is not nearly as dangerous as it would like to consider itself to be. It is important to keep in mind that this nation has constructed its whole military doctrine on the basis of a missile saturation strategy, which was intended to afford it the ability to completely dominate its adversaries. If the United States B-2 bombers and other forms of aerial firepower hadn't destroyed Iran's missile launch sites in such a comprehensive manner during the first week of the conflict, we would be witnessing Iran carrying out a significantly bigger number of strikes and employing a greater quantity of missiles than we are currently seeing. Therefore, it is only inevitable that this would result in an even greater number of hits being achieved, particularly inside Israel, which is a natural target for Iran's missile. Instead, Iran needs to adopt a more strategic approach. In addition to the fact that B-2 bombers have destroyed its missile launch sites, it is necessary for it to restrict its operations to isolated strikes. This is because the missile launch sites that are still operational become targets as soon as they are employed. Iran has reportedly adopted a quick-fire technique, which entails bringing a launcher out into the open, rattling off a missile, and then frantically attempting to bring the launcher back into cover before the counterattack arrives. Afterburner comes to this conclusion. We say this with a sense of desperation because the United States is able to launch a swift and powerful retaliation as soon as the missile launch appears on its collective radar. It is possible for the United States or Israel to conduct an attack against one of Iran's launchers within 4 minutes of the launcher being activated, as stated by President Trump. That does not provide Iran with a great deal of time to get that launcher to a secure location, and it also means that each and every one of its missile launches has the potential to cost Iran both the launcher itself and the opening that it utilized to carry out the launch. As time goes on, Iran's residual capabilities are gradually being eliminated. This dilemma is made more worse by the fact that the United States is refocusing its strikes on preventing Iran from maintaining its missile manufacturing capability. This is because B-2S have made it possible to hit deeper within Iran without risk. Regardless of whether or not Iran intended to construct additional missiles, those plans have been forcibly halted. This implies that each launch that Iran executes contributes to the depletion of its missile arsenal. As of March 5th, the Jewish Institute for National Security of America asserted that Iran has lost 75% of its missile launchers, as well as up to 52% of its short-range ballistic missiles and 73% of its medium-range ballistic missiles. In addition, all of these missile launchers were reportedly destroyed. Furthermore, this was before the news of the United States' most recent deployment of B-2 bombers on March 6th became public. Therefore, what we are witnessing here is the methodical annihilation of an entire political ideology toward war. Each and every deep hit that the United States B-2 aircraft executes not only prevents additional missiles from being launched by Iran, but also makes it easier for other aircraft from the United States to carry out their attacks. Iran is getting more strategic with its strikes because it has been compelled to do so, and each of those strikes brings with it the great risk of reprisal from the United States of America. With regard to the topic of retribution, Afterburner asserts that the United States is essentially starving the Iranian retaliation machine. This is the conclusion that can be drawn from all of this. It is true that Iran is still firing missiles, but if its launchers and missile sites hadn't been disabled by B-2s and their precision-penetrating bombs, Iran would be firing a great deal more missiles. It is only going to get worse from here on out. The United States of America and Israel are continuing to broaden the scope of their own operations in addition to concentrating on Iran's methods of missile production. The oil infrastructure of Iran are currently on the docket after a significant portion of the country's military capability was rendered ineffective. According to a report that was published by Al Jazeera on March 8th, strikes against 4 oil storage facilities and an oil production transfer center in Tehran and Alborz were responsible for starting major fires around the region. It appears that the United States is moving on to Phase 3 of its operations, which will involve the removal of the literal fuel that Iran needs to keep its disintegrating war machine chugging along. This comes after the United States has crippled Iran's missile launching capabilities with its B-2s during the second phase of its assaults. This is another example of systematic destruction. As a result of the B-2s removing that answer, Iran does not have a response to consider. And constantly looming just over the horizon is the possibility of yet more B-2s arriving to execute their surgical attacks to the most desirable targets that are still in Iran. This is a possibility that is always just around the corner. It was announced that the United Kingdom had finally granted authorization to the United States to use its facilities, notably RAF Fairford and Diego Garcia, the latter of which is located in the middle of the Indian Ocean. This news came as the second week of the Iran war was beginning. But why is that even relevant? In any case, B-1B bombers have already arrived at RAF Fairford, and there is a good chance that B-2s and B-52s will follow suit in the near future. Additionally, now that Diego Garcia is in play, all of those bombers have a base that is located in close proximity to Iran, where they are able to refuel and replenish their weaponry. To this point, Iran has been attacked by B-2s, which are required to make round journeys that are more than 30 hours in order to reach their destination. In the near future, that period will be greatly reduced, which means that additional B-2 strikes will be carried out against Iran at a frequency that is significantly faster. Since Iran's air defenses are in a state of disrepair, they will be unable to defend the country against the planned B-2 bomber strikes. Furthermore, it is unlikely that Iran's Air Force will be able to provide any assistance in this matter. Iran's Air Force, which was already significantly weaker than the United States Air Force, has been crippled, and the few airframes it still possesses are facing the possibility of the United States launching the one missile that transformed air combat for all time against them. View this video to learn more about the missile in question. In addition, if you found this video to be enjoyable, you should subscribe my channel so that you can see additional video coverage of Operation Epic Fury. In addition, I want to always thank you for watching.